sorting out the noise on things people believe that just ain't so. With Robert Mills as he welcomes you to Facts Not Fiction on his show tonight. Digging through the noise, breaking down the spin, research over rumors, that's where we begin. No fear, no fiction, no political show, just the facts uncovered on things people believe that just ain't so. And now let's enter the realm of Robert Mills' show.
All right, good morning, everybody. It is June 1st, and it is 21 days to summer. The days are getting longer, and never forget, not to bring you down, but on the day after that, they start to get shorter. So think about that. You know, we this endless cycle. Let's go to long, let's go to short. But today, I'm very happy once again to be with my good friend Robert Mills, who is a distinguished an attorney and an advocate for the consumer when he had a big firm, but has also traveled worldwide, over 63 countries on an itinerary. My understanding is his wife Miriam puts together and says, we're going there. And anyway, that is with a tremendous amount of knowledge and background. He has put together a great podcast for us today. So Robert Mills, coming to us from California. How you doing today, Robert?
Terrific, Randy. Always delighted to be with you here.
As we are with you. Get you off the mountain, get you in front of the microphone, and I don't know which is scarier. So it's all good. So where are we going today, Robert? What are we talking about?
Well, today I'm going to go back and revisit and expand upon this thing we talked about last time, which is this emerging threat to the health and safety and well-being of every single American. And that threat is the attack on science. And more broadly, the attack on reason and evidence as a way of finding the truth, you know. And this attack is going on now increasingly on a number of fronts, okay? And there are organizations today whose goal it is to convince people to stop using reason and evidence, okay, and to find the truth, to find the truth, and instead to rely upon what somebody uncritically tells them, you know. And I'm astonished, as I think perhaps you are too, Randy, that there's so many Americans today, you know, they have this thing here, this cell phone in their pocket, okay, and it's like the Oracle at Delphi of ancient, you know, Athens, you know, where the priestess, you know, will give you the future. You can ask it a question on ChatGPT about anything, and it will give you an almost instantaneous answer in a few seconds, you know. Do people use that? Do they say, what are the pros and cons of climate change? And you know, are vaccines safe? You know, what is the arguments pro and no, no. Never do that. So, in this last podcast, we talked about this, and we talked about where it all began, which was this guy named Thales. Y'all had the one name, Thales of Miletus, where they were from. Randy from Freeport, and that he was the first guy to say the truth is reached through reason and evidence. Before that, there was this cacophony of people saying it comes from this sage or that religious figure or some mystical experience or the teachings of some cult or some king. Science struggled for thousands of years to get a foothold. It didn't just start, and no one followed it until the late Middle Ages. And then England and France adopted, their kings adopted a Royal Society of Science. And it exploded after that and went on to create the modern world as we know it, okay? And but all this time, and never until recently, there have been all kinds of elements out there that have been opposing science. You know, these crackpot things. Well, first of all, there was the Christian groups, and I don't mean Christians broadly, but there's always these subgroups of Christianity that they call themselves the young earth creationists, and they opposed every scientific advance from from radiological dating to where fossils come from, what creates mountains and glaciers, and it all came from Noah's flood. And these people all argued that the world was 6 to 10,000 years old. Okay.
Yeah.
And all this stuff about stars, I mean, it was all nonsense. Okay. And they've sort of died down recently. Okay. And science, it appeared to have achieved a large ascendancy in the modern world, except for a few crankpots, like the people who believe the earth is flat. They're still with us. Okay. And, um, but disturbingly, in the last few years, these anti-science people have started to reemerge again. I mean, it's really disheartening. Um, and one of the things they've talked about it, one of their pet peeves is vaccinations. And I was down there in the South recently doing this roots trip, and I went to the graveyards. They're full of kids, and our great grandparents were lucky if half of their 6 to 10 kids made it to 18. And what got them? Infectious diseases got them. That's what got them. And the average life expectancy was only 36 in 1800. It was a pretty advanced time. That's not that long. Our great grandparents. And infectious diseases slaughtered the children. Okay, today it is extremely rare for a child to die of an infectious disease. 14 out of 100,000 deaths are caused by infectious. That's next to nothing. A 100th of some percent. Okay. The number one killer of children today is gunshots, followed by accidents. And, but there's this group now, they just emerging, they're gaining enormous traction. And it's disheartening to me. And I'm sure it's disturbing to everybody that how unprepared our teaching is, our educational background, our ability to reason. That today I just read this shocking statistic that 25% of the American people believe that the um, MMR vaccine causes autism. Okay. 20, that's millions and millions of people believing something that is facially wrong. There's not a shred of evidence that shows it's true. And there's been study after study after study about autism and these vaccines. And they stopped doing them because they said we've exhaustively determined that autism is not caused by vaccines, but they just keep on believing it. So why spend more money? It's not going to make any difference. Okay, so this is all a threat. And it has recently been taken up by this guy, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., is the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he's come in and he's an anti-vaxxer, and he lied in his Senate confirmation hearings, and he said he wasn't going to do anything to interfere with science, and he got this Cassidy, the senator from Louisiana, to vote for him, the sole vote that got him on, by lying through his teeth and saying he wasn't going to do anything to stop vaccines. And the first thing he did is go out and fire all of the vaccine panels and start setting in motion this whole thing to undermine vaccinations. And this takes this whole prestigious Centers for Disease Control and just destroying it. And he blocked their publication just last week or so that showed, they did this long study about how vaccinations for COVID-19 are safe and cut hospitalizations, and they're safe. Millions and millions of, and he just don't publish that because I don't like it. I don't agree with it. Okay. So what's even more disturbing to me is that he has dismantled these organizations in the CDC that monitor rising threats that are coming our way, like the Ebola, a highly infectious, deadly disease in Africa that's going to come here. And there was a group in the CDC that monitored these things, that told us, gave us advance warning. This is what's coming our way. Get ready for it. Prepare vaccines. Do something. They've dismantled it completely. So we're now flat-footed and blind. It's coming, but we won't know until it's here. And we won't have any vaccines once it's here. And millions of people are going to die. Millions of people are going to die because of
Well,
this.
before we get into that, that's a stark black and white statement that millions of people are going to die. I hope that that's not the case. I understand what you're leading to, but Ebola has broken out, and I'm not defending RFK. I'm just saying there's been Ebola breakouts in the past that they contained and kept in Africa and so forth and so on. And it is a deadly disease. And actually, somebody asked one of the researchers, I think from Cambridge, how come you never really worked on getting the vaccine for it? Because they just never really have. They could have over a number of years, but they didn't. But
Well, they didn't do the vaccine because it wasn't here, and really they probably should have done the vaccine on, but it was suppressed to the level they thought, well, that's not,
right,
and they
and
did.
and again, I don't want to be the harbinger of the communication device where we're telling everybody we know something where millions of people are going to be dying. I mean, obviously, if the disease did get embedded in American society, we absolutely, would have a major problem here. We saw that
Well,
in 2020.
let me qualify. That's a good point, right? Let me qualify. I mean, I'm just saying that, I mean, there's several fronts here upon which there is grave vulnerability. Okay. Number one is just things like COVID. If we allow, because of FDR, the number of people who are getting vaccinated against COVID and measles and a bunch of other things is plummeted. And the number of cases of measles in the United States among children has gone to several thousand already this year, as opposed to like 23 in 2023. And
And
as
see,
it,
and again, we've mentioned that statistic in the past, and again, with RFK's leadership, that is, I mean, he comes in and he believes and puts all this stuff out, and now kids are dying. I believe that they should require him to come to a hospital and hold the child while it is sick, to understand what he's done and has done to humankind and to a baby, to sit and see that. I had with my own son, desperately ill child in '05, that it's not humbling, it's terrifying, and it's heartbreaking to sit and see
yes,
a child so ill that you can't do anything and you're the parent. And I have never understood this, going all the way back to 2020, when, people, they said, if you're, there were people that went to Trump rallies, uh, people that were significant, and I can't remember his name, but actually I think one of the guys were running for president at the time, went to one of the Trump rallies. They didn't wear a mask. There's no reason to wear a mask. Well, a week or 10 days later, he died of COVID
a
from
lot of
being
people
in
did
that
that.
crowd. I,
Randy,
go ahead.
go ahead, go ahead.
No, I,
500,
I just don't get. I don't understand, if we have the science and we have the knowledge and we have the reason, and you've spoken about this in the past two or three times we've been together, is pulling people up by their bootstraps. 25%, one out of every four, you're telling me that believe this causes autism. I haven't seen any evidence. Have two grandchildren that are on the autism spectrum. I'd love to know what the reason for that is. I believe the reason for them being on that spectrum, quite honestly, that they have brilliant parents. I mean, on a very high IQ, studied, go to school, high performer. Same with the grandparents. And I said with my granddaughter when she was born, early on in the first few months, I said her biggest, all she did was cry. And I looked at her one day and I said, "Your biggest problem is you want to know how to speak English now." She was frustrated, captured in the shell of being able to reason. And honestly, the high performance of both of those two young people, I mean, they're off charts. So is it autism? Is it way of, you know, if there would be, they've had all the immune shots in the world, but that didn't cause it. If they had it, they had it at birth. No, I'm just saying,
right.
we
An
knew
inherited,
something. It was just the way it was.
yeah, inherited. I mean, we inherit all kinds of things. But let me address the excellent point you made about, let's not just speculate about millions of people. Let's talk about that, okay? Um, One of the threats of measles coming back, and one of the threats of COVID-19 not being vaccinated is once these viruses or microbes get out moving around through people, okay, they mutate
Right.
and they can mutate to defeat the people who are vaccinated. And the people who are vaccinated become vulnerable. And as it spreads out there, it keeps mutating and mutating. And that's why it's important to crush it and keep it from growing. So the threat is exponential. If it comes here and people are not vaccinated, it's going to mutate into something deadly. And Randy, 500,000 Americans died of COVID-19 who refused to get vaccinated. There were 1.2 million that were killed, but of that 1.2 million, 500,000 died after the vaccine was available. And they said, I don't want the vaccine. I'm not going to take it. They died. That's more people than died in all our wars, because they didn't want to get vaccinated. But that could be nothing compared to, some new thing. There's new pandemics coming. I mean, you ask any scientist, any epidemiologist, they'll tell you that that's just the way of the world, that there are all these people and they incubate them and they pass them. Eventually, there will be more COVIDs, different ones. Maybe
Well,
Ebola.
they've been through, I mean, back in World War One, there was what, the flu that hit the world and,
Influenza.
and killed a lot of people. Bird flu, people probably don't remember bird flu being around. And actually, if you remember do you know what the price of eggs, why it went up this year or the past 2 years? It had nothing to do with our economy. The chickens got sick. It was spread throughout the country. And the chickens, they either had to kill them or they died. They had, I guess maybe you'd call it human flu. I don't know what they had, but they had a communicable disease that killed chickens. They became rare. It had nothing to do with Biden. It had nothing to do with Trump. It had nothing to do with anybody. They got sick and died. It is a fact of humankind and of the world that, lack of a better term, grit happens. And you better be pretty gritty if you're going to survive. You better be knowledgeable, have to understand, try to, what do you call it? Reason and logic and research and
Reason and evidence. Reason
there
and
you
evidence.
go. Let's read, do a little bit of reading and protect ourselves as opposed to somebody, you know, leading you down a place where all of a sudden I lost friends during COVID. Two of my dearest friends died within 30 days of each other. Both of them lived in Houston, very famous people.
Really?
Yeah, they were very famous. One was a very famous golfer, and the other one was a famous mother of a very famous actress. Everybody would know. And but they were friends that I stayed with overnight many times, many trips to Texas. And they passed very shortly. I couldn't even go to their funerals. I mean, it just, it was just heartbreaking to lose two good friends. And they were senior citizens. They were in that era, and I can tell you that one of them would not have taken the shot. And I'm not going to say who it is, but I'm just telling you, having been in, I'm just going to use this person's home. They were very leery. We had many long talks about medical science and the benefits of it, and this didn't register. It was not a bright person. I mean, I'm stunned. If you, I give me the vaccine. I did a different show this weekend. We were reflecting back in the 1950s, and it's called Coffee and Tidbits. And basically, it was just a show about how my grandfather raised me. It's some good music, but I covered the fact how different from your podcast today is that back in the 50s, I told on our podcast, oh yeah, we didn't have vaccines. We had the benefit of getting the measles, both kinds, hard and I don't know if you called it soft, but there were two kinds of measles, and we got the mumps, and certainly got chicken pox, and whatever the hell else we'd get going to the swimming pool, and I would have given anything to have not those experiences because they were you don't feel good, and you have damaging sequences that come from it. So continue on. I just am.
That's a
I'm
great point. I think that need to be said. So, to recap, as these diseases, as the unvaccinated population grows, vulnerable. We're going to have this ever growing group of people with disease, passing it around, incubating it, and allowing it to mutate. And the threat will grow and grow. And we got new ones coming like Ebola. And there'll be others that we don't even know about now that are
Right.
coming. And what the CDC has done, what RFK Jr. has done, is to take down the shield, to take down our looking out and seeing the forecast, the monitoring function, so that we don't know what's coming our way. We don't know how to fix it. We don't know how dangerous it is. We don't know how to make it. We're just going to sit back and wait till it gets here. And, it's inevitable. I mean, we look back through history and we see, I mean, the Black Plague would kill, half of the people that lived in certain areas. I mean, that's, it's incredible. They would depopulated large portions of England and Germany, just depopulate, killed everybody, And I remember that, here in California, just north of me, or in my county here, there was this huge Miwok Native American city here, and three epidemics hit it at once. They didn't have the white man's immunities, and there was this town like 30,000 Native American advanced Miwoks, and it wiped them out in a month, killed 90% of them. Just and they were people could smell it for miles. They were just people looked like they'd gone out for lunch, but they were all laying around dead in their tents. And so it was, this is coming our way, and you know, and what it takes is somehow what we're here to talk about is that attitude that you mentioned of your friends. You have this discussion with them, and for some reason, our educational system, we have not gotten people to acknowledge the basic insight of civilization, the most important and consequential insight ever, which was that reason and evidence leads to the truth, okay? And they just don't understand that yet. We haven't taught that in schools. And we're going to pay dearly for this, and
Well, how
it's,
do one of the things we talked about on this show is that we get leaders in a position to make all these changes, and what's their motivation for it? I mean, you get the current president decided to appoint RFK, but a lot of other people in his cabinet that some people would sit and say are not qualified, wouldn't be qualified to do lower position. I don't even know how to say it. It would just be you look at somebody that gets appointed in his cabinet and you go, are you kidding me? And then when RFK gets appointed, do you think he's really going to continue to tell the truth? And all he's done is sit and strip out everything that was good, including money funded to WHO, World Health Organization, which would have been nice to us to have a leadership position right now. But how do leaders, tell me, Robert, use that power to manipulate society? I mean, it's got to be historical.
I mean, this is a fascinating question, Randy, you just asked. It goes to the foundation of this whole issue. And for countless centuries, leaders wanted to control people. They wanted to control information. The church did, and they burned at the stake people that would deny their view, their monopoly on truth. And leaders, to endear themselves to this group or that, or because they, don't understand this concept of reason and evidence, leaders themselves, they lead people down this path. And we are seeing this, that was one way of controlling people. This is what Putin did when he took over Russia, is he would tell people one thing one day and something else another day. And he went after the very concept. This goes to something even more fundamental than science, which is the concept that there is such a thing as truth, as opposed to untruth or falsity. That's a philosophical concept, that there's something is true or not true. It's binary. And they go after that, okay? And have succeeded. The Nazis did it. The Chinese did it. The North, all these groups would go in and confuse people and, and get to the point where they could no longer had a grasp that there was such a thing as truth, okay? And we're moving in that direction here now where, people, and you see it in a number of different arenas. Let me take you to another arena, the 2020 election, okay, which is
Yeah.
an example of these issues that we're talking about. And what happened there is that, you know, people come forward and said, because Trump said so, that the elections was rigged, and people believe it to this day, and they're being elected to high offices in Republican controlled states. People that believe the election was rigged. They come on my tours. I give history tours in San Francisco and for the city, and I engage them. They engage me, and I'm very cordial with them. And I say, you seem like an interesting person and knowledgeable person. I'm kind of curious on your take. How did they rig the election? There's 176,000 independent precincts, and the only people who can vote there, people live there. The only people who can count the votes, people live there, and they sit around a room, 15 or 20 of them, elbow to elbow, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, and they count the election, the ballots, okay, under closed circuit TV, under the protections of the sheriff and the police, and then they report that up. Okay, now in order to fake that vote enough to be outcome determinative, now not just one vote here, 20 there, but enough to change the outcome of the election, okay, would require 50 or 60,000 people or more getting in on a conspiracy that would send them to jail for 20 years against their own candidate, people that are not ideologues, people who've just been volunteers doing this for 20 or 30 years. Is that even plausible that that could even happen? How could it happen? Tell me, what's your theory about this?
The problem is this has all been proved. 63 different court cases, no evidence of anything.
None of it. No evidence.
They did a recount in Arizona with Trump's own people, and the only thing they found out, I think, that Biden got 9 more votes than what he was, given, and no evidence of anything. And still today, and this is the point. And again, we've got about 5 minutes, maybe 5 minutes left in this segment till we go to part 2, is that Trump today still says it's rigged. Everything's rigged. And he's now trying to do what appears to try to do what he can to manipulate the vote this coming fall. With all kinds of things, which I don't even want to get into in this podcast, because that would drive me crazy. We wouldn't have enough time in the week. But again, I read or heard over the weekend that when he lost the first election, he was told many different times, many different ways by his own people, hey, did I lose? And they go, yeah, you lost. Fair and square. No, I didn't. It's all rigged. Not based on anything. Poppycock and fairy tales. Stuff you'd find in your stocking, at the holidays. It just was frivolous. So we've got about 3 minutes here, Robert, and then we'll get set up for part 2.
Okay, you're right about that. He was confronted with this, and he would say, he said that when he didn't get some award for his TV show, about The Apprentice, he said it was rigged. That's what he said. Automatic, it's rigged. If I don't win, it's rigged. And the only evidence that was ever submitted was in one case. I checked on this, as a lawyer, and this one case they came up with this poll that showed that, taken 3 or 4 weeks before the election, showed that Trump was ahead. And they went to the judge and said, oh, here, see, here's a poll shows he was ahead. And the judge says, wait a minute, and so the other side came in and tore this poll to pieces. It wasn't a poll of the whole electorate. It was rigged. It was not representative. It's like going and polling the people in a Democratic district and saying, what's going to happen. And of course, it's been mostly Democrats. So it was not an accurate poll. And it was flawed profoundly. And the judge said, look, it doesn't matter whether the poll is flawed or not. We have a poll, and it's on election day, and it's called an election. And that's the one that counts. And we would never have a binding election if we could come back and say, well, I had this poll 3 weeks ago and this and that, So he said, no, that was the only evidence that was ever submitted, that showed the election was wrong. But this is back to our point about being able to manipulate people's minds so that they don't have any concept of what's true and not true, and they can believe things that are not true and with no cognitive dissonance about it, that the fact that there's no evidence for it, and there's overwhelming, unrebuttable evidence in favor of it, they just can't accept that. This is scary. This is a pathology. This is a form of madness, that the world is heading that way, and these groups are multiplying and growing. The vaccine people, there's others groups who are against reason and evidence. And this is a threat to me and you and the well-being of every American. And we got to do something to stop it.
Well, I appreciate that. Everybody, we're gonna be back in just a minute. We're gonna dial Robert off the ledge here. We don't want him to take that step because he's on the 100th floor. We're gonna come back with reason and logic, and old Uncle Randy's gonna dial it back. But don't forget, we appreciate you tuning in and being passionate about your own feelings. There's a lot that can be said about all of these. We want everybody to have logic and reason. Please do. It's amazing that millions of cars can drive on the Kennedy Expressway every day and get along. Do you ever think about that? They get along. They get into work, they get back from work. The majority of the time, nobody gets in an accident, and they follow the rules. How does that happen? Is that all rigged? I don't know. I don't think so. Maybe rigged with intelligence, and you don't want to lose your license. But well, I'm excited for the second part of this. Stay tuned, Robert. Be patient. We'll be back up here just in a minute after just this one brief message.
Looking forward to that, Randy.
Thank you much. Just at the end where you can link to it and then find behind the scenes, the notes, the things that make Robert and Randy get up in the morning and lay awake at night and wonder about the world. So anyway, Robert, last one. Well, we are back, and thank you for coming back in this vital conversation about what's going on in America. I just got a note, saw a note that came across the line here that that weaponization fund has been halted due to the blowback. People didn't like it, I guess, you know. I had heard that his vice president was one of those people that didn't like it for good cause, being that people wanted to hang him on that day of the insurrection. So I don't know. It's all nutty. Everybody, I want to tell you something. This is just, I don't usually try to share too much, but this is coming from a senior point of view. Today's society is exhausting. Everybody is informed. I understand why people check out and they get on their phones because there's this little fix that you get when you go through your reels. It takes you out of normal thinking. It gives you a short fix of fun, and people stay on their phones and they do this all day. I don't do this, hardly none anymore, because I just don't like to. I like to read. For me, I read a lot of scripture in my own faith work, and that I find enjoyable. But I do a lot of research along with Robert. But I will tell you in general is that because of communication, my belief, Robert, of the way communication works today, is that everybody, can feel the power at their fingertips. If they don't like what somebody said, boy, they can get on their own Twitter account, or they can reach out and they can show them and get that, everybody can respond whether it's truth or not. And it's just exhausting. I mean, if you read stuff and you think you got to say something, or you have a position, or you think you're going to make a difference, again, everybody has an opinion of what they're going to do. And all Robert and myself are trying to do is bring logic and reason and truth to this podcast. And, say, hey, we're living in a world that is, it's got risk, hopefully has a future and a bright future, and stuff does change. And if people that are in politics don't believe that the world can't be without them, they should take a walk in any cemetery, because it's full of people that thought the world couldn't be without them. So anyway, that's enough my old Randyisms for the day. But you got me all fired up, Robert. So continue on and tell me everything's going to be okay, and what do we have to watch out for?
Well, we all hope everything's going to be okay, but we can't just sit back and just let it go, and do nothing. If we do nothing, things are not going to be okay.
That's right.
And one of the things you just pointed out excellently, that um, is a problem today in America is the extreme ugliness of our political discourse. The people vilify, especially the president. And there's all kinds of studies and all kinds of shit. If you vilify the people in who are your political opponents, people will start to hate them. They will start to act violently toward them or whatever and discount them. And this is not the way toward the kind of political compromise and discourse that has made this country great. We were the country that pioneered in many ways, along with England, the very notion of compromise. And compromise, believe me, is not the way of the world. It is the antithesis of the way most of the world works even today. I mean, in the Arab countries, and in Europe in the Middle Ages and later, compromise of any form was dishonor. You had to have it all. You had to vanquish your enemies. That's why 50% of the entire population of Germany slaughtered each other in these religious wars between 1618 1648. In 30 years, they killed half the people. Armies don't even kill anything like that.
Hmm.
Why? Because they disagreed with each other. Okay. And they had this ethic. And I see it, I saw it in my law practice, when I represented Palestinians and Syrians and Iranians. They had an ethic that, and I'm not, they're not all have this way, but most of them did. And this ethic was you can't compromise. Compromise is dishonor, shame. You have to have it all. Look at the Israeli situation. From the river to the sea is the Palestinian slogan. The Jordan River to the Mediterranean. That means that you have to get all of it. And so, um, you know, Thomas Friedman, the famous New York Times columnist, wrote books about the Middle East. There was one called Alexis and the Fig Tree, and he goes and interviews this very sagacious, brilliant, charming, wise Palestinian guy. And he says, "What's the solution? How are we going to fix this thing?" And he sits back and he expects to hear something thoughtful. And the guy says, "Well, they just have to leave." And he says, "What do you mean you have to leave? All the Jews have to leave Israel." He said, "What? 5.5 million Jews, where are they going to go?" "Oh, not my problem. They have to leave." So that's the thinking of this kind of thing. So what we in the West, was forced on us because of the Spanish Armada was defeated, and the ability of the Spanish king to hang Queen Elizabeth and destroy positive and science. It was, and so the two sides ended up equal, slaughtered each other for centuries, and finally were forced to accept tolerance. That's where it came from, Randy. It wasn't something adopted. It was forced on the Western world. And that's what distinguishes the West from the rest of the world. We believe in tolerance. And out of that grew political tolerance as well as religious tolerance. And out of that came freedom of speech. And out of that came the whole idea of liberal democracy. You have parties and you discuss and debate things. And we pioneered the idea of compromise. It made it popular. It was honorable to compromise. And it made America great. It made America work. And it worked until just recently when groups have, on the far right have begun to attack people for compromise. They've taken a more and more hardball stance, and Trump vilifies the Democrats and says that they're these horrible people and they're terrible. They're communists and they're right-wing crackpots and they're these horrible. When you talk that way, when you vilify your political opponents, as opposed to people to sit down and reason together and try to reach a compromise, try to work out maximizing both sides' interests, you're making politics not work. It's defeating the ability of the United States to function and to do the kind of what politics is, where disagreements get hashed out. That's what happens in Congress, is that the left and the right have to sit down together and work it out and come up with something that works for everybody. Okay. You're defeating that when you say that my opponents are evil, they're horrible people. And it's really stirring up the prospects of political violence in the United States for the first time since the Civil War. And it's terrible. And so what we need, is a sense of uh, epistemic humility. That means, you're not certain of what you're certain about. And that was, I think, Bertrand Russell's phrase. Epistemic humility means that you're humble about what you're certain of. And so you can sit down with your opponents. People as late as Ronald Reagan, who was this right-wing Republican, was an extremely honorable man. He had great respect for the institutions of the United States, and he had a great respect for his opponents. And he and Tip O'Neill, who was the Democratic head, so they would go off and have whiskey together, and and they get and they got stuff done, and they didn't vilify each other. And
I want to
so
show you something. About 5 minutes ago, at the top, right there, I wrote Tip O'Neill. It's just like,
yeah, it's a great example of what
yeah.
we're missing now. And so what we see, if you read these great things, The Darkness at Noon in 1984, and these great novels about what it's like in the totalitarian societies, and see how they work, we're moving. That's what the right is moving toward in America. They're flirting with fascism. They're flirting with the kinds of thinking and the kinds of practices and policies that lead to totalitarian ruling. And it means it's throwing truth to the woods. It's ugly. And one of the things that we're losing in our society is accountability. Back in the 50s, if a gossip columnist for the New York Times said something that wasn't true, they paid a price for it. That wasn't true. And today, politicians make these statements, that aren't true. They're just lying about this and lying about that. And pretty soon no one holds them to account. If you don't hold people to account in public life for what they say, the electorate loses its ability in a democracy to influence policy and laws, because you don't even know people say I'm for this and they're not for that. Kennedy said he was not going to do anything if he was appointed health secretary. He wasn't going to do anything to interfere with vaccinations. He turned around, did everything in his power to do just that. So how can you then have a government where people are not telling the truth? So that's all these things are creating an epistemological crisis. Where epistemology is what I studied in Berkeley. It's the study of what is truth. And we're moving into a world where truth is disappearing. There is no such thing as truth. Truth is what you want to believe. It's not what's this binary of truth and falsity. I like thinking that the election was stolen. I don't need any facts. I mean, those Democrats, I don't believe it. So we're moving into that world where horrible things are going to come from that.
Well,
And we need to.
it just, all they do is just throw this, I hate to say it, crap against the wall or against the fan. And when you bring up that people cannot be wrong in normal reporting, do you remember Brian Williams, a really good anchor for NBC, I believe, a number of years ago?
Yes.
He had one story, I believe it was about Hillary Clinton, that had some bad reporting in it. It wasn't true. One little story, one little fragment of it cost him his career.
Yes.
He still has not found. I'm sorry.
It was common in those days.
Yeah.
You report something wrong. You say something that's wrong. A gossip columnist for the New York Times comes up with something that's not. They punish them for it. And same with politicians. If you said something, it had to be true, and you were held to it. But if you're going to not hold people to what they say, the world comes undone.
And that's what bothers me. The one of many different things that Trump has done, he came up with the term fake news, pointing at CNN or anybody other than Fox, I believe. But those reporters still today, he just brutalizes, it says things to them that are just so demonic and so just wrong, that if you were in a third grade class and said those things, you wouldn't be in that third grade class very long. You'd be going down to Principal Dean's office and sitting there and going, wonder what brought me here. Because I can't imagine if one of those reporters was my wife and I had somebody like that look at her and go call her scum or, worst ever. I'm not going to take your, he just doesn't like the questions. because he doesn't know how to answer. But those people that are in researched, third and fourth party, second, reaffirmations of the story being true, when they get introduced on MS Now, they are professors that have a job and a career, and they have to be truthful. They can't go out and just spout out lies. They're people with in a place where, and anytime they introduce anybody on MS Now, which Trump doesn't like because it's not supporting his fantasy world, is that they give their short, brief resume, where they come from, which by reason and logic would sit and say these people are trying to tell you the truth, what's going on. He just doesn't like it. So then he calls them every name in the world. And then again, the essence of the show is, why do people, the power that has given him, now right now he only has a 33% approval rating, but the power that has given him to, again, tell me in the last 15 minutes how we get around this, Robert. What do we do? Because it is huge in our society. It's the biggest problem we have.
Well, you put your finger right on it, Randy. You're right. I mean, in order to have a functioning, healthy democracy, it is necessary that we Americans respect each other's points of view, both Democrats and Republicans. We have to say, okay, that's your point of view. It's got to, you legitimately believe that, and I legitimately disagree with. We have common interests. We probably agree on 99% of the issues. These 1% we disagree. We have to sit down and respectfully work this out together and not vilify each other. If you start vilifying people that disagree with you, the whole thing comes undone, as you can see what's happening now. And, it's very unhealthy to say, that these people are evil. We're not going to, and it stimulates people toward violence, toward just dismissing them. It leads to all kinds of bad things, stalemate being one of them, and not being able to get things done. And just this whole atmosphere in the US that exists today of extreme partisanship, where one party's vilifying the other party, and this is no way to get things done. You can't govern this way. So we need, the first step is to respect each other, and say, you're a good person, you're an honorable person, you're a reasonable person, but we disagree on this point. Let's sit down and reason together and see if we can find some way that you can have most of what you want and I can have most of what I want. There's probably a way to do that. And that's what we did in this country for 250 years. We can keep doing it. But that's not what Trump wants to do. He wants to vilify and alienate and stuff. And this is taking us in the wrong direction.
One
And
of the one of the things that I find it hilarious, sad but hilarious. When he came out with the tariffs, everybody would ask his secretaries, well, who pays that tariff? Where's it? Who pays that tariff? Well, the other country pays the tariff. We're going to raise billions, trillions of dollars. Everything's going to be fine. No, who pays that tariff? People here pay the tariff. It raises prices, and again, people would go out and prophesize and say, "Oh, he's right. Going to get all this money in. He's got to be right. He's our president." Now, the humorous part I find is that people here stateside can apply to get their money back because they paid the tariffs. They paid the tariffs. It's proven fact. Why doesn't somebody go back to his, and I know he'd never answer it and they'd dodge around it, but why, if these other countries were the ones paying the tariff, how come, red-blooded American business owners are getting the refund? So the other countries didn't pay the tariff.
I mean, underneath all of this is the fact that, what we need in this country is be able to sit down and reason together. And there's a temptation always to vilify the other side, to say I'm right and everybody's wrong, and I don't want to hear what they have to say. That's kind of an innate, children are like that. We have to get over that as adults. And have
Right.
to accept the hard reality that other people may disagree with us. And every now and then they're right. We're wrong. And so we have to keep that humility with us. And we bring that to our political dialogue that, I respect you and, you respect me and we're going to sit down and work this, even though we really disagree, but there's a temptation among leaders, especially see somebody's indulgent as Trump, it's just to say I'm right and everybody else is horrible and wrong and I want my name on everything and I'm the greatest. And, it's this narcissistic impulse is out of control, along with cruelty. There's a tremendous cruelty element in a lot of what's happened, and vilification of the opponents that is really destructive and damaging and is leading us down. And the answer is you have to vote against those people. And otherwise we're going to go down this very dark path that other countries went down. I mean, Russia turned into a dictatorship, in China and Germany and many other countries where you have a one party rule. And the interesting thing is the way they went about this and the things they said and did, how they treated their people was very similar to what's going on here now. You read Darkness at Noon in 1984, and you could say, hey, wait a minute, that's now. This is what they're doing now. Why don't people realize this? But was the famous historian said, those that don't understand the past are doomed to repeat it.
Right.
And sadly, that's the situation that we are now. And we could fix that if we start teaching people how to reason, critical thinking. Reason and evidence is part of it. Critical thinking and logic and reading history and the importance of knowledge and facts and facts being paramount and how it all works together and through science and that's wonderful world that science has brought us and how much better and how different everything is today and easy and fun and rich and than it was for our great grandparents. They lived in a whole different, much harder, harsher world. And science made this world for us. And it can take it away from us if we get rid of it. So we need to do that. We need to love each other more and politically, and we need to get rid of people in the political sphere who have those qualities because they will come around and bite you back if you put people like that there, because the next Democrat that's elected if he's elected, if there is an election, is going to be ferociously putting us, trying to change this, to rectify, and maybe even getting even. We're going to start a process that's gone on too long here of tit for tats and stuff. And we need to get back to the old days of Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan having going off and having a snort together, of brandy, and working things out and respecting each other. And that's not something that's unachievable. And I see that as the bright shining goal that we Americans, I talked last night about Millikan and how he disagreed profoundly with Einstein, and he instead of just mocking him and blocking him and all that stuff, he designed, spent 2 years designing an experiment that would prove one way or the other by facts and reason and evidence who was right. And it turns out he was wrong. And he didn't suppress it the way RFK did. He published it and he said to the world, this renowned physicist, the top physicist in the world, the United States anyway, and he says, Einstein was right. I was wrong because the facts and the evidence show that in science. And that's the path. That's the model, the example that we all need to follow that in science as to what is truth. Okay. And if the vaccine proves to be safe, what RFK should say, I was wrong. The vaccine is safe. Here's the proof of it. Get it, be vaccinated, but just hide it. Don't tell anybody about it. Throw it in the trash can. This is not the way. Okay. So the way is clear, and you and I are pretty clear on it. And, I think that that telling people this and articulating it is helpful. It's enlightening, and it gives us a path.
Well, I think, I'm willing to have discussions. I had told this story before. I was working out in a health a very small YMCA, and there were two Trump advocates and having a very fervent, I love you conversation about everything going on in the world that was Trump right. And again, this was in Wisconsin. It's a, swing state. So 50%, it's a 50-50 room at best. Okay. And I was on the treadmill and they were about 3 feet away and fervently this, that, and the other thing. And finally I got off and I said, I'm paying for this membership. And I said, hey, and I said very politely, I said, would you guys mind having a conversation with me out in the hallway? Because I know that you're very fervent about what you have to say. I'd just like to learn a little bit more. And so we took it to the hallway, and not for fist fights or even a bad conversation. I just simply said, we're just what I just told you. I said, you got 40, 50 people in there. We're all working out. We come there to keep our health. It's hard enough. And half the people in there really aren't going to agree with you. They just aren't. Neither here nor there, don't really care, other than we pay, all of us in that room, the same freight you're paying to be there, but not to politicize it. I don't want to have this be a bad conversation. So we started having a good conversation. The conversation went on, honestly, for about an hour. And we got into the election results. And I said, well, here, we're in Wisconsin. I said, turns out that one of the guys he works in one of the polls. I mean, one of the election, he's a guy that goes in there and marks the ballots, and as you come in, and he sits there and he works in the day of the vote. And I said, tell me what possibly could happen while you're working there with fellow Democrats. Did somebody bring in 10,000 votes? I mean, did we miss that? Is that possible? He goes, no, it's not possible at all. At all. Just for the same things that you said, is that you would have to have 50,000 people agree to keep the biggest secret in the world that the election was rigged in 2020. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And at the end of that discussion, it was a friendly discussion at the end. We just agreed, we don't agree. That's fine. I just told him my vote cancels his vote. And that was the end of the discussion. We're in Wisconsin. And at the end of the day, somebody's going to win and somebody's going to lose. And it's okay that it goes back and forth. Getting back into President Reagan and how he could turn things around and make you feel good, even though you're the focus of the brunt of the joke. During one of their, was it McGovern that he ran against as president?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the question of age came up, and they said, because President Reagan was substantially older than his opponent. And the question was asked, what do you think about the age difference? And President Reagan's response was something to this effect. He says, I will not let the youth of my opponent get in the way of what I think his ability really is. He just turned it because they were.
I'll use that against him.
Yeah.
I want his youth and inexperience against him.
Yeah.
It was a kind and humorous, that acknowledged the issue, but in a respectful way, and
right. And he got votes for admitting he's older. Everybody knew it. It's right there. You can see it. But he turned it around, and that's what made Reagan Reagan, is that he had the ability to really enchant people with his, he filled up a room. He's one of those guys that could fill up the room with, you wanted to be around him. He was a great president. And Robert, I'll tell you, it's been a great afternoon. Once again,
Robert Mills welcomes you to Facts Not Fiction on his show tonight. Digging through the noise, breaking down the spin, research over rumors, that's where we begin. No fear, no fiction, no political show, just the facts uncovered.